I took my Alexa 35 to Japan and did street photography with it. No, I didn't actually. I don't have an Alexa, but I did take a video focus camera with the initial intention to do video, but I ended up mostly doing photos with it, and it was so much more fun than I had expected. This is the Sony ZV-E1. This video isn't going to be technical or informational at all. This is a 2-year-old camera with the sensor being almost 5 years old, and there are hundreds of other videos out there going in depth with the technicalities. Rather, I just wanted to share my thoughts about my decision getting this camera, how it was to actually use on the streets, and some shots I got in Japan, while ranting about how much better Japan is than the great old city of Indianapolis, Indiana, in the untied states of America. What's even better than Japan though, is a like on this video and a subscription to my channel, as well as a comment on how much I baited you into this sentence on a scale of 1 to 10. Also, if I sound like I chain smoke twice a day every single day on this trip, it's because I do sound like ass because someone gave me the flu while I was in Osaka and I'm still really congested and I'm coughing my lungs out from it. I knew that in Japan I would be taking a ton of photos and video, as well as walking a ton, so I didn't want to walk around with a big bag and a big lens. I had never shot digital photos in full frame before, so I wanted a small full frame camera, and I wanted it to be a reasonable price. Therefore, I wasn't going to bring the Fuji since it had an APS-C sensor. I was stuck between a few choices: the Lumix S9, the Sigma FP, the Sony A7C II, and the ZV-E1. Of course, the Leica M series would be the go-to for the best quality, compact digital cameras, but they were way too expensive, and they're also not the best for video. I don't really care for the Nikon ZF, plus it's pretty big being an SLR style camera anyway. All these cameras can do 10+ bit video, on which I can go ham with color grading, which I love doing, but I thought the Lumix and Sigma had superior raw photo colors, and they were both smaller than the Sonys. The A7C II was the only one out of the 4 that had a viewfinder, but it was also the priciest of the bunch. However, I decided with the ZV-E1 in the end because it was the cheapest in both short and long term, I think and hope. I was able to land a great deal used, and I didn't have to buy new batteries, chargers, and adapters. I could also flawlessly match it with the FX3 II if I needed to. I brought my film camera with me too, my Rollei 35RF, so I bought a Sony E to Leica M mount adapter to have a super compact, high quality photo and video machine. Honestly, I thought I would be swapping lenses more often, mostly between my Folklander 28mm Ultron and my 40mm Nocton, but the more I took photos with the 28, I fell more and more in love with the wide-angle look, and I'm pretty sure 100% of the photos I liked and rendered were shot with my 28. I have a couple clips with the 90mm Tele-Elmarit and the 40mm, but the 28 stayed on for the majority of the trip. I will definitely have to make a video specific to this lens because it's just that good. Size absolutely matters to me when doing street photography. The low weight of the ZV-E1, along with a single small 6-cylinder sling, that's a lot of S's. That's a lot of sling made shooting and carrying this thing around so much more endurable than if I had taken the FX3 and some cine lenses with me. This setup was light and comfortable enough to constantly have this thing hanging around my strap outside my bag, so I had space to put my film camera in the bag with some space for trinkets and other stuff I would buy during the trip. It would have been smaller with the 40, but like I said, I like the 28 look better. Features and build quality can be better, especially at this price. The lack of a high-resolution viewfinder obviously means you only have the LCD screen to monitor your shot. Sony, famous for having some of the shittiest screens on the market, actually did the world a favor by being consistent and making this screen god-awful as well. Granted, it's not as bad as they were a few years ago, but it's still lower resolution than my 12-year-old Fujifilm X Pro 1 with 1.037 megapixels versus 1.23 megapixels respectively, of which the latter also has a higher resolution viewfinder as well. My friend who I went with had a Canon R, and I was constantly getting blown away by how much better the screen looked. And speaking of the X Pro 1, although MSRP was about the same or a bit more than the ZV-E1 new I think, still cosmetically looks brand new with no loose parts or finicky components. The ZV-E1, with plenty of light plastic components, started to act up near the end of the trip when the zoom rocker would get stuck whenever the on-off switch was on, so I just had to stop using the zoom function with video. Luckily, I didn't need that function with photo since I shot in RAW, but it was not very confidence-inducing when it came to reliability. The issue somehow fixed itself by the time I started writing this part of the script though, so yeah, crazy, spooky. I've mentioned this time and time before, but I despise Sony's raw photo colors. The skin tones turn orange and yellow, the leaves turn blue, and the images just have a bit of a clinical look to them. Technically, apparently they're supposed to be a little bit more accurate, but it looks ugly. Luckily, I figured out some Lightroom presets to make the colors slightly better, but they're still not perfect. I've also been monitoring the photos the entire time in black and white to compose using light, and since they're in RAW, I can edit in color if I want. Most of my photos are indeed in black and white, have lots of grain, lifted shadows, pulled highlights with the lens itself having a pleasing distortion, basically removing all the possible clinical and perfect aspects of a Sony digital photo. Video, I'm super familiar with, having colored and worked with footage from the sensor for multiple years at this point. It does have some quirks here and there compared to something with more dynamic range, but it's still got a top-notch look out of the consumer grade cameras. The sensor readout speed is another reason I chose this camera over all the alternatives. This has such small rolling shutter, making fast moving things like trains look natural and correct and upright. The only thing I disliked was that the camera was too light and introduced a bunch of shake and jitter that doesn't look amazing even when stabilized. I only used the standard stabilization and didn't use active stabilization as much to try to keep the sensor coverage full frame at all times, and for stills it worked out great doing things like long exposures. For video, it still looked choppy and stutty most of the time, but it was better than nothing. Like I mentioned, this was my first time shooting full frame stills on digital. I initially intended to do mostly video and try to make something like a travel film, but I like photo too much that I mostly just did that. Also, we were kind of just trying to hit as many places as possible in a limited time, and I also wanted to properly experience the country. Having shot with 16 megapixels for over a year with my Expert 1, 12 megapixels was also enough for me. I frame mostly correctly the first time, so I don't need to do a whole lot of cropping, and even if I do, it doesn't ruin the look of the image. I did do some video as well, but nothing with a coherent story, just some moving photos. Why can't every single country look like Japan? Everything, literally everything, everywhere, everyone is so photogenic. A crosswalk in one of the busiest metropolitan areas on the planet, straight out of a movie. Middle of absolute nowhere in the mountains where there wasn't even cell reception until recently. Wonderland. Some electricians fixing a power line. Magazine cover. Everything is so dense there, even the suburbs, there's always something to look at within your field of view. Everything is so clean, everything looks so nice, and even if they aren't, they have a unique aspect to them that just naturally draws your attention. Compare that to here, like what is this? A road? A McDonald's, you drive 20 seconds with nothing of interest besides like a bench with an ad, and there's a tiny tan brick and concrete strip mall of which 95% of the land is just parking space and dead grass. The overwhelming majority of the country looks like this, and it was definitely one of the first things that hit me hard with a depression when I returned from this trip. Even cities look nothing like this. Indy isn't a great example since it's still not one of the biggest cities in the countries, but even places like Times Square, like, yeah, it's big and tall and has a bunch of lights worth millions of corporate dollars, but it's also so spread apart and wide because every single road is a road for cars to drive on. It's nothing compared to pedestrian streets filled with signs belonging to hundreds of unique individual and privately owned stores and restaurants with not a single speck of trash in sight. So there's me ranting about how I definitely am not already in the process of networking my way into and figuring out residency procedures in Japan, with an added bonus of my experience with a digital mirrorless photographic capturing device. If you enjoyed the video, learned anything from it, or if you just wanted to see photos of Japan, like the video and comment what you liked, and subscribe to my channel so I can hit 1 billion subscribers by next month. I apologize for not uploading. I'm gonna make a ton of excuses that are just excuses and don't make sense. So I'm done. Stay safe, don't die. See ya.